Alright, clean it down real good. Let it evaporate for a little bit. And then we'll go to the next step. Okay guys, don't mind the mess. Another thing I like to do, I got the new timing belt out of the box. Got the new idler adjuster over there. I take and I match up the timing belts. And I even go as far as counting the teeth. Because I don't want something bad to happen because I missed something stupid. And you never know. It's not that I don't trust the part stores, you just never know. So I just double check everything. This one has 137 teeth. I just counted this one and it has 137 teeth. So I know we're good. And now we can start reinstalling the timing belt. I'm not sure if you took notice, after I cleaned everything, it revealed these yellow index marks that I put on there. What that is just reference mark that I put there probably years ago, just to help me get a guideline to make sure nothing moved. Once I pull all the locking pins out, I can see how far the timing marks move. And plus I got one down on the crank. That way I don't have to keep jumping back and forth looking through that sight glass. It gives me a pretty good indicator that I'm lined up. But we'll get to that. So it's not a bad idea to put your own index marks on there. It's a good reference. Okay, now in this step, I'll take and drape the timing belt over it. And what you'll see here is with the injector pump locked in and the cam locked, I'm like a half a tooth off. And it would be super tight if I went and pulled that in. That's why you gotta loosen up this cam sprocket. That's good for demonstration. This will show you the correct way to do it. Okay, now to loosen that up, you gotta make something to keep the camshaft from spinning, because you don't want to put too much pressure on the stuff you use to set the cam in place to lock it. So what I got here, like I said guys, I make most of my tools, or I make work with what I got. This tool here is made for actually setting pinions and rears for crushing the collars. But I just simply put 2 bolts through it. And just held it in place and get it loose. Once you get that pretty loose, you get yourself like a dead blow hammer and you just give it a couple little taps. It doesn't take much. What this is a tapered, it's like a cone shape. Like the cam goes tapered in and it's the opposite taper on the other side. And when you tighten it up, it creates what they call a taper lock. And once that breaks loose, as you can see, the cam's sitting still, but the sprocket's spinning. And what this will allow us to do is adjust that belt, get it nice and tight, and then lock the cam in place. Once you got it broke loose, run a bolt in so it just touches, but you can still spin it, because you don't want it flopping around. Because the looser it gets, the further out on that taper will get and it'll start cocking. So you want to keep it close in, but you don't want it locked. Okay, double check and triple check to make sure your top dead center mark is still lined up. And we're going to take and feed our new timing belt in. Make sure you don't kink it. I'm just going to drape it around. We're going to go around the injector pump, around the back side of that intermediate shaft, and then around the crank. Okay, now with the timing belt draped around, you don't have to line up that mark. I just do it. Oh yeah, make sure this clip is on the opposite side of the timing belt. Okay, got our new idler pulley. You'll see it has this bracket on the back side that points up into the rear, and there's a notch that you got to make sure that goes into. Just slide off the cam. Move that around one tooth. Okay, and then we're just going to work it in even know there's other ways of doing this. However, what I do, I just slide it on, and then you see that little tab? I just push it back until it lines up with the hole, and I just push it in like so. Because otherwise, it's a real pain to slide it all on. But that's just my method that I found works pretty well. Okay. Now just double check, see if you're real close on that crank mark through that sight hole in the transmission. If you're a little bit off in the direction that when you tighten this up, it'll pull it back. One tooth off is going to set you almost out of that sight glass. So you'll know if you're one tooth off or if you're just within specs, because once you pull this, it might turn that crank a little bit and put you right on line. So before I go much further, let me show you where the crank is right now. Okay. See how it's just a little bit off to the right? Well, once I tighten that tensioner up, it'll pull it. Now if I was one tooth off, it would be out of that sight hole. And now if you don't get it in the first shot, like if your mark went out of the sight hole, that's what's good about that reference mark on a crank. You can tell which way you have to turn it, because you don't want to go too far in either direction. Like I said, it's interference engine, so that's what's good about the reference mark on the crank. You can just put it close, get it back in the sight glass, pull it back off, and get it back in the sight glass, and then just repeat the step of putting the time belt on. If you get it in the first shot, you're actually doing real well. Now it's time to put the tension onto the belt. I'm going to show you on the old tensioner here. I'm not sure how good you can see here on the old tensioner. There's a notch, and then there's the other mark. You're going to turn it clockwise until that notch lines up. So let's do it to it. Okay, I like to use a little Loctite on those threads. Just a matter of preference. I'm going to turn it clockwise. Like I said, they sell a special tool for this as well. Okay, hopefully you can see that. I got the two marks lined up. Just going to lock this in place. Okay, now I'm going to get my torque wrench and torque it. Taking torque to 15 foot-pounds. This is a smaller inch-pound torque wrench. There's 12 inch-pounds and 1 foot-pound, so just times it by 15. I think it comes out to 180. Alright. I already torqued it. The reason I use my smaller torque wrench is because my bigger one starts off at 20 foot-pounds. Everything's still locked in place, whatever you use for your shims on your cam. And then we're going to take and torque the cam down to 33 foot-pounds. I already have this one torqued. You can take and install this little idler. This really doesn't make too much of a difference as far as the tension goes. Torque that down about a little bit more than 15. Okay guys, once you got everything torqued down, the tensioner set in place, and all your marks are aligned, now you can take and remove your pin. I already knocked it loose from the other side. You could go from the other side with a punch if this gets wedged in there and tap it out. Okay, you can take and remove that. You can take and remove the shims from earlier. Really, these yellow reference marks I put on there don't do much good. Only for the injector pump and the crank. I like to line that one up too as well when I torque it down. That way it if it comes back, I can easily see with jump time. Okay, so we have our shims removed from the cam, and that's torqued and locked in place. The tensioner is set. The pin's removed from the injector pump. Now we got to see if the crank is still aligned to top dead center. Let's see if we can see down in there. Abracadabra. Now it might take a few times, guys, to get this perfect. However, just keep playing with it until everything's aligned. Then you're good to go. Okay, and then I come down below, put the ratchet back on the crank, and now we're going to turn it clockwise 2 complete rotations to make sure everything's good. As you can hear the compression, that's always a good sign. Okay, that's one. Okay. That's 2. You should only feel compression. You shouldn't feel anything binding. If you do, stop. You have something wrong. But you should feel compression. And in this case I do. As you can see, all of our marks came back. And we're good. Now we can start putting it back together. The tensioner is still right in a notch. Okay, I feel confident. Going to come back down under the right side. Reinstall our lower cover. And then just put in your 1, 2, 3, your 4 retaining bolts. Okay, yeah, it's actually 3 bolts in that lower cover. You'll see that there's a little pin. Okay, like a little dowel. So your balancer is gonna pretty much just go on one way. You got these little bolts. Okay, tighten them up. Alright, torque all 4 of them to 18 foot-pounds. Just so I don't accidentally drop anything down there and to keep the debris out, I'm going to take and install the upper cover. You got it now. There's a piece of rubber hose. Keep it from rubbing through on the cover. Alright. Just want to make sure these clips are on the right side before you go too far. I can tell you how many times I put it on and the clips were on the wrong side. There it goes. Okay. Make sure they're all locked in place. You got that little plastic screw. This insert will push in first. Okay, now you got the little fill set screw. Okay, I'll pull that in. Take and pop that back in place. Make sure all these reference lines are looking okay. They go down to the turbo and the wastegate. Okay. I like to try to get everything closed up, so I'm going to take and install the valve cover gasket. I like putting a little bit of silicone in the corners. Install the valve cover gasket. Okay, make sure it's seated all the way around. Now we're going to take and install the valve cover. As you can see, that stud that I removed on me before, I removed the nut from it, reinstalled the stud, and then you got these three tapered seals that go over those studs. They seal the studs to the valve cover. Okay, install the valve cover. Nope, somewhere around there. I got these 3 cup washers type deal. I'm going to take and run these down even. I'll look up the torque spec for you. Okay, you can take and torque these to 89 inch-pounds. I got these torqued. Just going to double check. Just going to take and reinstall this breather. So don't forget these little grommets. Okay, now I'm going to install the serpentine belt. The routing's pretty easy. Pretty much goes around the harmonic balancer, in between the water pump and the power steering pump pulleys, and then around the AC compressor, down around the bottom side of that tensioner, and then I'll come up around the alternator. Like so. Figure I'd give you a shot. It goes around the harmonic balancer or the damper. You got to shove the belt in between these 2 pulleys and get it on the inside. It goes around the AC compressor, up around the alternator, then under the tensioner. Okay, now for the power steering and water pump belt. Pretty much goes up around the water pump, around the damper, and then around the power steering pump. Yeah, there's only like 2 good teeth left on this tensioner. Just pull it until your belt feels nice and snug. Okay, now we just got to put this lower cover back up. If you look in, it just pushes in to the clips in the front, and then it just pushes up and bolts up in the back. Okay, just like so. Okay, now we're going to take one and install the lower air cleaner box. There's these rubber grommets on the bottom. You seen the one fell off earlier. I got it right here. I'm just going to take the loose one and set it there for now until I get this, because it takes some finagling. I think I get outside with this. Get it down here, just wiggle it in place. Okay, now you reinstall that little plastic tube, put your 2 screws in it. Then we can take in that little grommet, reach underneath now, slide it over. You can feel everything, it just falls in place. Okay. Install the air cleaner. I think I remember what I did before. I just took and removed that headlight, just the light bulb itself. But be careful you don't touch the bulb, get any oils on it. But if you remove the light bulb, it gives you a lot more room. Okay, just in case you're wondering what's going on down in there, that's where those two O-rings are going to pull that and hold it, retain it in place. And if you follow that plastic tube, I hope you can see where it goes. That just goes back and goes into that rubber grommet. There you go. Pretty much like that. Hopefully you can see then. Pretty much just wraps around the bottom loop, comes up and grabs the top. Same thing on this side. Okay. And I pretty much put these clips back in place. Inspect your hoses, make sure nothing cracked. Make sure everything looks good. Then you install the upper half. Remember, just one hose. Plug that in. Slides all the way back in. Latch your latches. Okay. Plug your mass airflow back in. Install your intake hose. Install this little rubber grommet. It'll keep the debris out. Okay. Okay, this would be a good time to look everything over because we moved a lot of stuff around. So we want to make sure we didn't unplug anything or disturb anything or crack any hoses or have anything pinched as far as the reference lines going down to the turbo for the wastegate and whatnot. We're over here as well. Make sure we didn't unplug anything. Broke any hoses. Okay, everything looks good. Install the top cover. I'm just going to put the 3 retaining nuts back on. Okay guys, I think we got it. Got the tire back on, it's lowered off the jack stands. Everything's good. I double checked, triple checked. I know the timing's dead nuts on. As you've seen, we set everything. So I'm pretty confident there. A lot of times you'll start the vehicle before you put it all back together like this, but if I'm feeling confident in a job, I'll just take and I'll finish it. That way if it starts up, it's out the door, I'm done. And I'm not heating anything up any more than I have to. That way I could just put it all together and it's done. So, it's a moment of truth, guys. Let's fire this thing up and see what happens. And remember, keep in mind, it's a diesel, so it's going to rattle. Okay. Glow plug lights out. Okay guys, that's going to pretty much wrap it up for today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Just keep in mind this is a more advanced level job, so use extreme caution. Only take on this challenge if you feel you're up to it, because remember, like I said, you could cause internal damage to this engine if you do one thing wrong and you get it at a time, because it is an interference engine. So with that in mind guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I try to answer them all. I read them all and I try to answer them all. Or visit me at toolsandtime.com. I got a free to join forum. Post your questions there so I could answer them in more detail and I don't have to worry about running out of characters. I could post pictures, schematics, you name it, guys. I'm just here to help you out. I know there's other forums. I'm not trying to compete with anybody, and I hope you guys can realize that. And just stop by. If I can help you, I will. So until next time, guys, stay tuned. And also I ask that you subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Have a good one.